It's time to engage in cyber talk with the Chief of Cybersecurity.
Well, welcome back to another episode on my live screens. I am so excited because I have some great information to talk about. In the previous live screens that I had, it was focused more so on the inside of an architect and taking a look at cybersecurity and focusing more so into individual protection standards and some of those other type of programs that you have to engage into cybersecurity with. And there was a large discussion in some of those live streams, especially about the cybersecurity mindset. So today I want to focus on something that's very important because if you have worked in the cybersecurity industry for a while, you are always challenged to protect the enterprise. What I mean by protecting the enterprise is that you want to make sure that nothing can be infiltrated. You want to make sure that all systems are safe. I remember when I was in the Navy, and one of the things that the captain always used to ask me when I was standing my watch in the Combat Information Center, he'd say, "Chief Hart, how's my ship?" He said, "Are we protected?" And still today, I remember being asked that question so many times, and I used to respond to him and state that I just put a ring around the ship. And he goes, "A ring?" I said, "Yeah, it's a protective ring." So I'm making sure the bad guys stay away. And that same concept applies to cybersecurity because cybersecurity is a protective ring, especially around your organization or yourself. But to make that protective ring operate, there needs to be a proactive cyber defense strategy. And that's the topic of our discussion today. We want to talk about a cyber defense strategy and looking at ways to implement that strategy, but to also take a look at a architect and saying, this is what I need to do because I've been hacked 2,000 times over the past year. Or maybe you onboarding brand new applications. And you need to see whether your cyber defense strategy is working or not. I I remember as a junior analyst when I was working for the government, I remember many of times that there were some work that had to get done in trying to engage the cyber defense strategy and to making sure that email was filtered, making sure that certain assets that were supposed to be on the network was visible. And if there were assets that were not supposed to be on the network, then those particular assets were always looked upon and investigated. And that was part of the cyber defense strategy. So I want to roll into discussing the cyber defense strategy, but first I want to build a practical definition. All right. So we know that cyber defense is about keeping a system safe. All right. So making sure that the bubble stays protected. If you look at a security architect or a security landscape, you will notice that there's different type of systems that an organization can have because you can have Windows systems, you can have servers, you can have different types of kiosk machines, and now cell phones or mobile devices. An organization has to protect all of those devices. But certain times, if an organization is set at only 1,000 assets, and then over maybe 4 or 5 years, let's say they grow to 50,000 assets. Well, the cyber defense strategy has to change because as you onboard all those assets, you're going to have more endpoints, right? And hackers are always looking for the weakest link, okay? They're going to look for an attack vector that they can roll into your network with, okay? One of the other factors too is that you don't want to create no soft targets. Now, soft targets are the most vulnerable gateway to enter your network. or you as a person do not want to become a soft target. So that means that when you're using social media and the different platforms, that you protect your accounts. Okay, so part of the cyber defense strategy is that you want to be proactive and you want advanced information. You want to be able to say, okay, then I can predict certain type of incidents that are going to happen on my network. Part of that is making sure that you have the right tools in place. If you as a person have probably been to one of the technology shows that normally occur maybe on a semi-annual basis, like AFCEA or some of the ISIC shows, or for CompTIA or any of the certification vendors. When you go to those technology shows, you always notice that there's different applications and tools that are just constantly growing. And the purpose of these tools is to help you out so that you can have visibility into your organization. Now, certain tools are designed for certain organizations. So with cyber defense and your proactive strategy, then you're going to be thinking about what type of tool should be on your architect, because not every tool is designed for every architect. Some of the other things that you have to think about too when it comes to a proactive strategy is that you don't want to become reactive, because the idea of a proactive cyber defense strategy is to work ahead of incidents and negative events. You don't want to be caught up trying to catch up in an emergency mode and try to clean up all these negative events. And with a proactive cyber defense strategy, you're always at the front gate and minimizing those risks that could occur from those negative events. Some of the other things that you have to think about is that you want to harden your systems. When you harden a system, that actually means that all of your patching is done. So that means that the baseline configuration standards that you have for your architect are done. And and if it's any other type of issues that you find, let's say for instance, if it's a log4j that you find on a server, right? You want to remediate that as early as possible. And part of your cyber defense strategy is that you may state, okay, in my organization, if it's a critical vulnerability, I want it to be remediated within 5 days. All right. If it's a high vulnerability, then I'm stating that it may take 7 or 8 days. These are all part of your proactive cyber defense strategy that should be in place. Some of the other things that you want to look into in your cyber defense strategy is that you want to look at your workforce, your people, because the people that you have on staff has to has to have a defensive mindset. And the defensive mindset falls into human firewalls. Here's a prime example. Let's just say, for instance, if you have an employee that uh, works at the front door of your building, and someone comes to the front door and say, I am a subcontractor and I need to uh, go up to your wiring closet because I need to replace a switch. Now, part of the human firewall mindset is that you're going to question that person. You're just not going to let them through the building because, there could be a potential hacker. It could be someone that's probably trying to cause damage to your network. If you go back and look at some of the other incidents that's probably happened over a couple of years ago, there have been some corporations that fell into that trap because there's certain employees that that are not aware of the cyber defense mindset, and they were not acting as human firewalls. So when you think of a human firewall, think of that defensive mindset that actually needs to be in place. Some of the other things too is that when you think of cyber defense, it's ongoing. Cyber defense never stops. Cyber defense stays with your system for its life cycle. If you are integrating your security development life cycle, what you also want to look at is whether your cyber defense strategy matches your system development lifecycle. Because as that system begins to grow, you're going to gather more endpoints. And as I said before, if you start off with 1,000 endpoints, and then over a couple of years, you see yourself at 50,000 endpoints, well, your cyber defense strategy has to change because you're not monitoring 1,000 devices. And this is where visibility comes to surface here. And I always make notion in the cybersecurity mindset about having that 360 degree of security visibility. Because if you don't know what's on your enterprise, then you don't know how to protect yourself. So these are just some of the basic principles in relationship to the proactive cyber defense strategy. But I want to show you something here that's very important as well too, that I think going to help out. So when you think about the cyber defense strategy, I want you to think about some basic principles. Okay. In these basic principles here, you're going to be challenged with making sure that they stay in place. Okay. So in our diagram here, there is a protective ring around your business structure. And in that business structure, you have sales and marketing, human resource, finance, legal, information technology, and you have your facilities. So the premises of your cyber defense strategy is to create a cybersecurity shield. So the cybersecurity shield serves as that protective ring. And on the inside of that protected ring are all those different elements that needs to be in place so that cyber defense can operate. Think about data loss prevention programs. Think about zero trust, right? Think about isolation. Think about password protection, okay? Think about privileged access management and all those different type of programs that are available. They are supposed to help you maintain that protective ring, because if that protective ring is not protected, then what happens is that the business structure falls. So let's talk about our three principles here. We all are really knowledgeable of the CIA triad, right? But did you know that in the CIA triad itself, uh, it survives because of the way that you approach your threats and your vulnerabilities. So in our diagram here, if per se we can minimize our threats and our vulnerabilities, then we can maintain the CIA triad. If you maintain the CIA triad, then you can keep your protective ring in place. So let's go to principle 2. As I stated before, you can have your threats and your vulnerabilities, but as you minimize your threats and your vulnerabilities, so that means that risk goes down. Most people that work in the industry of technology will go tell you that the word risk is just spoken so much, because that's the premises of cybersecurity itself, is to lower risk to an acceptable level. But in order for that to happen, right, you're going to have to keep in mind that the cyber defense strategy is about maintaining the cybersecurity shield. So if you go to principle 3 here, what you notice here is that if you increase protection and you lower risk, then you can mature your cybersecurity program. As you mature your cybersecurity program, you can become more defensive. And this is the proactive strategy here. So just kind of take a look here and think about one thing in particular. If our magical friend over to the right is throwing fireballs at our protected ring, which is the hacker who attempts to defeat our principles, is throwing these fireballs at this protected ring. And if our three principles are operating, then guess what? We can beat the hacker to the finish line, right? Now, let's just do this in a reverse order. Let's just imagine if our principles were failing, okay? And as our principles are failing, then that means that we have become a soft target. And if you become a soft target, then the gate is open and the shield is broken. and your department is on a risk. And if your department is on a risk, then that means that principle 3 is really not working like it really should, because now what happens is that you are increasing risk, okay, and you're lowering your protection, and your cybersecurity maturity programs are failing, and then the protected ring fails. So this is a basic principle, and this is part of the cyber defense strategy. This is not anything new. This is part of something that's been operating for all the years that cybersecurity has been around. So if you're involved with cybersecurity, then think about that protected ring, and you think about what your overall job is, and then trying to maintain the business structure. Because we know that the outcome of the business structure means that clients may not be happy. And if you start to lose clients, then that's when the corporation fails. So our magical friend over to the right is trying to throw fireballs at us. Our job is to maintain that protective ring. Now, the way that we maintain that protective ring is very simple. The first thing we have to do, right, is to do an evaluation of our defensive approach. And it's simple. What are we protecting? Yes. Look at your enterprise. Take a look at all your assets. Take a look at your software packages that you have in place. Take a look at your different programs, like your configuration management program, right? And really ask a question: what are we protecting? Because if you don't know what you're protecting, then your cyber defense strategy is at risk, and it's going to fail, right? And you want to look at incidents over the past year or so, right? Because those incidents would tell you where your weak points are. If you had like major incidents over the past year based on Linux servers, then that can tell you that your cyber defense strategies needs to probably pay more attention to your Linux servers for certain reasons. Um, you want to look at your cyber tools, and cyber tools are very important, because if your tools are failing, then you cannot carry out your cyber defense strategy. Think about Splunk. Think about Tenable Nexus, which actually does scanning, and Splunk is a logger. Think about the other type of tools that you have, like ServiceNow, right? And just imagine if you don't do the plugin updates for these tools, because about a quarterly basis, the vendor will come out and say, okay, there's a brand new update for Splunk, and let's say you don't update it. Well, your defense strategy will not work well, because you have inaccurate information, because you're not up to date. Even so, you think about your vulnerability scanners that you use, because there's plugin updates. And if those plugin updates are not installed, then most recent vulnerabilities that you have, maybe something like from Google Chrome, or if it's a remote code execution vulnerability that probably was discovered for like a Windows 10 OS, well, you may not find it. See, it's just that simple. Think about your customers. Customers are very important too. What is it that you want to deliver to your customers? If you have a strong cyber defense strategy, then you can keep your customers happy. One of the areas I always like to focus on is so much in the cybersecurity mindset, is that I talk about the value proposition mentality. The value proposition mentality is stating, okay, what is it that you have to offer your customer? Or what is it that you have to offer your company? And if you mirror both of those together, and if you have that mindset in place about the value proposition mentality, then you're going to become a high value asset. And once you become the high value asset, that's when your company likes you, and that's when the customers like the company. So part of that cyber defense strategy is thinking about the value proposition mentality. And it's very important, because it's a business enabler, and you have to have a value proposition mentality in place. So let's say, for instance, you've actually went through your evaluation process, and pretty much you kind of find a list of of issues that are potential problems. So what do you do next? All right. Do you go into the boardroom and say, I need $2 million so I can hire 50 people to help remediate all the vulnerabilities on the network? Or do you sit down with your project team and say, you know what? We need to come up with a gap analysis. And that's what I want to talk to you about. Carrying out a gap analysis. Now, a gap analysis is very simple because what you have is an as-is state, is where you currently stand, right? And then what you have is a standard. And so you're going to see what type of deficiencies that you have in your standard. Let's just say, for instance, if you're using something like a data loss prevention software package, right? And it's supposed to scan for social security numbers or probably credit cards. And if you notice that there are certain times when credit card numbers are not scanned and people are able to send out email, okay, that's a potential gap. So what you have to do is you have to look at that and state, okay, then what is the type of risk that is associated with that? Now, I'm not going to go into deep detail on that, but I don't think your customers would be happy. Even so, if you think about the perimeter protection, so that means that you have your firewalls, your routers and your switches are online, and for some reason, right, traffic is just going through your firewall that should not come through that firewall. Why? Maybe your ACLs are not updated properly. Okay. See, that's part of your cyber defense strategy. So when you look at the gap analysis, then you're going to have a standard. And so you're going to see what your security state is. And so you're going to see whether there are any type of deficiencies and you're going to clean it up. Because what you're trying to do is to do a cybersecurity alignment. If you are involved with the government in any kind of way, and if you have been through a RMF assessment, this is where the gap analysis comes to place, because there's a standard based on NIST controls using publication 800-53. If you do not meet the standard for certain controls, it's considered a gap. And then what you have to do is find ways to remediate it. All right. So those are some of the ways that you can think about doing and trying to identify your gaps. Now, what are some of the risks? Okay. I want you to think about your customers, right? Customers are very important because if they're not happy, then your cyber defense strategy is probably falling. Think about risk discovery and opportunities. In the cybersecurity mindset, I actually have a large discussion about this topic. And the risk discovery and opportunities is saying that every time you find a risk, that's a potential moment to excel, right? This is a moment for you to identify whether you're following a standard or not. Now, I do not impose the fact of finding risk, but I do impose the fact that when you do find a risk, it's an opportunity for success so that you can understand where your weak points are. Because part of that proactive cyber defense strategy is to know your capabilities, is to know where your weaknesses are. If you don't have a true indication of your defensive architect, and pretty much you don't have an idea of the type of capabilities that you are able to deploy, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And part of that is to just know your organization, know exactly what's on your enterprise. Later on, I actually have a great discussion about a topic that falls into that same concept. Some of the other things you want to think about, you need to have a risk-based attitude. Your organization needs to have a risk-based attitude. Now, a risk-based attitude is saying that part of our proactive cyber defense strategy, we don't care that we scored a 90% on this assessment, right? What we care about is that the entire risk state is being is being evaluated. This is called holistic defense. Okay. And that takes another road into stating, okay, if I have 100 checks on my enterprise, and if I pass 90, I am compliant, right? And I pass. But guess what? There's another 10% factor. So when you have a risk-based attitude, then you're trying to look at the entire picture. And what you really want to look at and say, okay, that 10% factor, it actually means a lot to me too, but but the 90% is just a benchmark. It tells me that I'm doing good, but I can do better. And this is what a growth mindset comes to play and cybersecurity maturity. All right, so despite some of the problems that can occur with a cyber defense strategy, and knowing that there can be gaps, we can make it work. So what I'm going to do now is to share some of my secret tips with you on how to make a proactive cyber defense strategy operate. Here's my favorite word off the top: continuous visibility, right? This is the one that I just spoke about earlier that I really want to share with you. Because if you don't know what's on your enterprise, you are setting yourself up for failure. Think about all the components that work with a continuous visibility program, right? Think about your asset management program. Think about configuration management, vulnerability management. Data quality analysis is very important because when you get your data from those tools, you're going to have to cleanse that data up. And your system tools as well too. All of those feed into your continuous visibility program. You want to maintain resilience because you need redundancy in your organization in case something fails, such as a server go down. Where's backup? This is part of your cyber defense strategy because that may be one of the major application servers that you need to keep online, and there needs to be some type of redundancy in place. And this is where resilience comes to surface through all changes and through major incident. You should be able to survive. Part of that is understand cyber stress, right? How much stress can your organization take before it completely fails? Active involvement is very important because in order to be part of cybersecurity, you just can't wake up one day and saying that we have an incident, so I want to be part of cybersecurity now. No, that needs to be active involvement. Even so, at the times when you don't have incidents, part of that proactive cyber defense strategy is to stay actively involved with cybersecurity. And you have to operate cybersecurity from the front lines because our role is to be proactive. If we work more on the reactive side, then we're going to be in the emergency mode. And we play cleanup all the time. And as you're going through cleanup, there are other issues that are compounding and still coming abreast. So you don't want to fall behind. So you really want to be proactive in what you do. One of the other areas here is that you want to modernize your technologies because there are some legacy systems that are deployed in certain enterprises. And if you work in a corporation, and I'm pretty sure some people that do work in those corporations out there can say that there are some legacy systems and some legacy applications in place. Modernize your systems and your application because as you're trying to protect the ring, hackers are coming up with brand new methods and throwing brand new fireballs at you. So what you have to do is to find ways to protect the ring, right? So that means you have to modernize your systems. Maybe you need to bring on zero trust. Maybe you need to automate data because automation is very strong now. And it's one of the tools that help resolve a lot of problems. One of the other keys too is plan, execute, and stay committed. For your proactive cyber defense strategy, have a plan, right? And you execute that plan and you stay committed to that plan. But it only is going to work if you stay actively involved into cybersecurity and understand that that protective ring is going to save you. And if you ever want to really have an in-depth understanding of cyber defense strategy, go out there and get a copy of the Cybersecurity Mindset, because it's a roadmap. It's a roadmap that's going to show you how to carry cybersecurity from point A to Z, but to make it simple, because proactive cyber defense should not be difficult. And if it is difficult, it's because somebody is behind the curve. Maybe that technology is moving faster than you are. All right. So, as always, I really enjoy having these conversations, especially about cybersecurity. If you're on LinkedIn, I want you to reach out to me. And also, I just started a Facebook group. It's called the Chief of Cybersecurity. And I wanted to do that so I can have a centralized place to share a lot of cybersecurity information to my Facebook group of friends. So if you have friends out there on Facebook, please tell them to join my Facebook page called the Chief of Cybersecurity. And if you have any questions, post those questions out there as well too, because I want the community to see the questions that you have, and I'll be able to answer those questions for you. All right, so until next time, you stay cyber safe.
You've been listening to the Chief of Cybersecurity Livestream. Please join the YouTube channel and purchase your copy of the Cybersecurity Mindset.